Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about hollowing and how to handle hollowing different types of parts when the orientation may not seem simple. And also, I'm going to give you some tips on how to take care of your hollowed parts afterwards, as we refer to aftercare. So that way they don't blow up, crack, and all sorts of other things that can happen to them, which I've seen and read and heard all the horror stories myself. So, without cutting too much into the episode, let's get right into it. All right, I'm in Lychee Slicer over here, and we're taking a look at a model. Now, some of these parts, obviously, you wouldn't want to hollow just based on certain things like the hair, head, sort of thing. However, because her hair and head is kind of long and wavy, maybe you would want to. So, how would you go about hollowing a part like that? Well, there's a couple ways you could go about doing it, and I'm going to show you my best method that I would recommend is you'd actually turn it upside down. You'd be using this hole right here and some of the parts of her forehead where you're going to be covering it up with a hairpiece. So first, let me go ahead and hide some of the other plates real quick. Yep. And just get rid of that body. Okay, so let's just take a look at the head. So the first thing you're going to need to do, obviously, whatever slicer you're using, you have to hollow the part first. Lychee slicer, you're going to go over to the hollowing prepare tab. Choose your hollowing method, however you want to, interior thickness, all that. I have my preferences. Other folks have theirs. Choose what's best for you and what works best. My best method is to go about 1.7 millimeters on the wall thickness, no thicker than 2 millimeters on the wall thickness, and I use a quality of 4. That improves the interior geometry. Just put a hole right there where that key is, and then we're going to put one more hole here because, again, this is going to be covered by hair. She's going to have bangs that are going to be covering her hair, all of this area. So I'm going to put a hole here, make it smaller, and then I'm going to put a hole here. Oh, too close. And then we'll just take a look at the interior, make sure we're not cutting through any other geometry, which I am. And you see here, those holes are going to be just fine. Her hair is going to cover that up. So the next thing you can do here is you can also place a hole here inside the key to give it some more vent capabilities while it's printing. Right. Might even make that just a little smaller so it doesn't fit so snug. And just move this hole down a little bit so those don't collide. And there we go on there. Now, this isn't done. You want to also put a hole down here at the bottom. This is later for venting and for cleaning. The reason I say venting, we'll talk about that. So, I'm sure a lot of you, if you're watching this episode, have probably, if you've hollowed a model before. So, if that's the case, you know the pitfalls of hollow. Your model explodes. I've had this happen while I was in the middle of painting. It'll just crack. Now, if you know why this happens, you're a smarter person than most. Most folks don't know why this happens. And I'll tell you why it happens. Essentially, it's a buildup of gases and pressure. The uncured resin that gets stuck when you're not able to clean out them properly, when you don't have the proper vent holes and drain holes. and you can't get all the gunk. See, that's what's going to happen is, right? You're going to wind up with a little trap of resin right here. And if you didn't have all these holes here helping you push air and fluid through while you're cleaning, that's never going to come out, especially this up here. And you're going to have all this uncured stuff in here. Now, as you guys know, resin smells. It definitely lets off an odor. There's a gas there. So as it's degassing essentially inside of your model, it has nowhere to go. Where's it going to go? Eventually, it's going to start increasing that pressure as the gas builds up, and it's going to push until it cracks. And then at that point, you get, the resin goes everywhere. You get fluid all over the place. It makes a mess, ruins your shelves, ruins whatever whatever you were creating there, whatever you made. And it's a nightmare. There's a couple ways you can avoid this. Like I said, you can make sure you have gassing vents. So these vents here for draining during printing, okay? But you're also going to have holes and vents that are going to be in place literally just for degassing the model. Letting that air kind of, essentially letting the gas release. Not the air, the gas. And if you don't do this, you're going to have problems with cracking and pressure. I've just seen it happen too many times. So that's why I go nuts and I put as many holes as I can. Excuse me. In order to accommodate that. Now, in this instance, like I said, there's two ways you can avoid it. You're going to clean the heck out of it, and then you're going to probe it with a UV cure light. And you can make one of these yourself, or you can, just make sure you get a lot of UV light shined inside of the head. Because none of those hollowing holes are going to be big enough to really get a flashlight in there or a really big curing light in there. That's why I say you have to kind of make yourself a little UV cure probe. I found a couple tutorials online for making them, so I'm sure if you literally Google UV curing probe, you'll probably find a couple Reddit threads literally talking about that subject. I am not the DIY techie guy like that. I actually had my brother-in-law build me one of those things with a small battery port and a couple wires, and it works great. You just feed it into the model, into the holes, turn it on, move it around from section to section, and it cures everything it can. Now, it's not perfect. It's going to miss some spots because you can't get it everywhere, but you can get it quite a few places, and it will definitely help you. But the degassing, or allowing venting to gas out the residual the residual gases that are left over from the resin, essentially uncured, sitting in the head or whatever part you made. Yeah, I could export that. And so it's got to go somewhere. And like I said, it's going to wind up breaking the model at the end of the day. So this way, if you put enough holes in it, you vent it out properly as much as you can, you're going to have a much better time than you would if you didn't. Is it going to be perfect every single time? No. You're still going to have some issues from time to time where this is going to become a vacuum and it's just not going to release the resin. See, because you still have pockets where resin is going to collect before you have a chance to drain it. That doesn't mean it's not going to work. It probably will. I've printed plenty of things like that. But you're just going to have to be really thorough about cleaning it. And then again, when you connect it to your model, this hole down here at the neck should be left open. And hopefully, if your upper torso is also hollow, make sure there's a hole there in the neck when you connect those, you have a vent there for those to gas into each other. Essentially, it gives you more room for the resin to gas out. But I'm going to say this: leave at least one exit hole somewhere on the model. And this is why, in a lot of cases, most of my models will have a hole on a foot someplace located at the very bottom. If not a foot, it'll be like just some port, either like on a head, coming out underneath like a hairpiece, and I won't glue those holes shut. Or it'll be, a tail hole that has like a little gap underneath it where the gases can escape there. But a lot of times it's going to be a foot. It's going to be a foot. Or they'll plug into the base, and the base will also have hollowed end vent. So it'll be able to vent. And I've had good luck with this since I've been hollowing and using this method of being able to vent the hollowed prints. So like I said, there's two big reasons why they're going to do this. One, you didn't clean them right, which means you missed some resin on the inside, which means you probably got a vacuum in here somewhere that's holding the resin. Two, you didn't cure it internally enough, or you didn't cure it at all internally. Some people actually have told me that their method is to simply cure the object for about 30 minutes, and that will actually cure the inside and the outside because eventually the UV will just penetrate. I'm not sure if that's actually accurate, so don't necessarily take that information, but hey, some people have told me some funny things over the years. So that is how you'd hollow, I think, something like this head. That's an example of one thing. Let's take a look at some other stuff here. How would we hollow some other weird parts? So we had this upper torso. That's an interesting one. Because this is, she's got one arm this way, one arm that way. And then we've got the lower bod here. Now this one I've already done. I did it ahead of time. Kind of give you an example. So you can see the arm here has a hole. That has a hole. That has a hole. Now her arms don't have holes in them. They're going to block those. But this was just for printing. The neck hole will line up with the other neck hole on her head. And down here we have two holes that will be connecting to the lower body. Now the lower body will also have holes in it. So you'll see there's a hole here. We have holes down here at the bottom that are also going to connect, and we have holes here. Additionally, now when the legs connect on this particular model, those leg pieces are actually going to be solid. So the unfortunate thing is once I connect the leg chunks here and here, you're actually going to be sealing those holes off. So one thing on this model I'm probably going to do before I assemble these or ship these is I'm going to drill one additional hole into the flat spot here and the flat spot here because when the leg connects, there's a little bit of a gap in between each kneecap where the armor sits and the knee is, where you can't really see that. And you'll be able to vent it through that. I think that'll work just fine. So that's that. Pretty much demonstrated through the different parts. Now, this will also connect to the base. So if her legs were hollowed, which you could do, I'm not saying you can't. You could technically vent through the leg down through the bottom of her feet, and then that would vent into the base that would be hollow. So there is other ways to do that and carry about that kind of hollowing technique where you're doing that. Now, the other thing about hollowing that some people have asked me is, stuff about infill. Now, if you wanted to do hollowing with infill, it's a little bit different. You actually have to use the 2D hollowing system. And that actually, when you use that, it pretty much takes everything and 2D hollows it. And the reason it says 2D hollowing is because it does the hollowing on on the slice level. So you still have to put your holes and stuff like that. But when you go to slice it, it creates this hex pattern that creates like an infill. We did an episode ages ago about it. I'll probably revisit it if I get enough folks asking me questions about it. But as of right now, probably not. Um, we just, I'm just trying to educate people on how to deal with the whole resin prints exploding kind of thing. So remember, holes where they need to be while you're printing. Holes need to stay somewhere once it's cured and being assembled, and some sort of exit point needs to exist between the top and the bottom of the model. Like I said, in this particular case, drill holes probably in the areas where the kneecap is going to be. It kind of sits like this. So there's a small millimeter gap there that's going to be enough, I think, to vent out some gas if I were to just drill a small little hole there, maybe a millimeter or two at most. But it's important. You got to maintain venting from the top to the very bottom. So if if the head's hollow, the chest is hollow, the torso is hollow, legs or not, you have to figure out a way to vent that through. So that is, it's kind of important to figure out your game plan before you step into something like that. So when I say advanced hollowing, essentially what I'm talking about is not necessarily techniques just to hollow, but techniques to take care of it and make sure that they maintain. So I hope this helps you with your hollowing journey with 3D printing, because I know that a lot of people have just hated on it over the years and said, it's not worth the trouble. I've had too many prints explode, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's your answer as to why. They're exploding because of the buildup of pressure. If you cancel out that pressure by allowing there to exist a vent, then over time, you're not going to have to worry about that as much. Now, really, your best bet is to clean and cure them as well as possible and make sure that you use some sort of curing machine to agitate the alcohol into the hole, so that way it does a lot better job of cleaning it than it would just if you're like just putting in a pot of alcohol and letting it sit. So take that into consideration and make sure that cleaning is very important when it comes to that. And not just the cleaning aspects, but also like I said, the curing aspects that I mentioned earlier about the internal probe and all that. Definitely things to consider trying to add to your regime if you are if you use hollowing and stuff the way I do. Anyway, good luck with all your prints, guys. Thanks for watching as usual. See you all again soon.